Great. Welcome, Pedro Cortina, the
Hello.
founder of Inquiry-Based Coaching, the founder of IBC.
Hello,
It came
Markus.
into your mind, and it was such a blink. And I'm so interested in how this started. I imagine. I think it would be a process to coming to these questions and putting them together and into inquiry. And I just wanted to ask how this started and how you came to IBC, how IBC found you.
Yeah. Thank you, Markus. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for allowing for holding this space for this chat. IBC was the result of a very long process of exploration and inquiry. For me, it started very early on, and while my friends were planning on going to school and going to do business or be a lawyer or be a doctor, this or that, I just wanted to be a philosopher, and I wanted to understand, not from a theoretical point of view, but from a deep profound knowing, what was this thing about that we called life and existence, and why are we bumping around stuff and feeling hurt and shocked and indignant and all this stuff. And so I started looking into philosophy as an applied model rather than a theoretical model. Philosophers were the first therapists, were the first psychologists, they were the first. And somehow, as we evolved, we philosophers lost that a bit. We lost that ability to serve the immediate needs or the transcendental needs of people in everyday life, and we became abstract and diffuse and diverted. So studying all kinds of philosophical backgrounds for decades, Eastern, Western, formal schooling, degrees, etc. Then I moved into applied transformation, entrepreneurship, leadership. So that's where I ended up doing my doctorate and my other graduate degrees, because I wanted to bring philosophy into action, right? And through that, we had been working with several transformational models based on inquiry that had served some purpose, but in a way, with the clients I was having, there was not a pure sense of release at the end, or full understanding at the end, or full liberation at the end. And working with Tanya, many of you know Tanya Fierro, the founder of Innerland Institute, working with her throughout the years, we've been working on this throughout the decades. We started noticing there's something missing here that was very clear, for example, in the Eastern traditions of the Dzogchen and the Mahamudra, which is this delivery into a spaciousness that is fully sustaining, that doesn't need any more work, that doesn't need any fixing or connecting or sustaining or giving maintenance, that it was just fully, finally emerging, self-emerging, and spacious, and could hold anything and everything, and from where all compassion manifested. And that was missing in the models that we had been using. And we call it zero space. We decided to call it zero space because it is that point where it's completely self-sustaining. It's not zero in the sense of there is lack of, or there is a sense of unfulfillment. It's zero as in all possibilities, as in open to all possibilities. So in this process of trying to go further and deeper and try and combine the different models we've had learned, and not only that, seeing in our own experience throughout decades of supporting other people, and where is it that they were able to get and why, and us as well, what was working for us, what was not working for us, and all the other inquiry models. So all that you can put in a blender, you know, or a cooking pot. You can turn on the heat and just imagine that simmering, simmering, simmering. Just imagine that thing coming alive. And because we're so committed to our own self-transformation, not that it's easy, not that we're always there, not that we haven't gone through intense dark nights of the soul, because we're so committed to our own self-transformation, then it becomes our own need to find the next thing, to go deeper, to get to that space and be able to stay there and be able to sustain it for longer and deeper and more powerfully, so that all this innate, whatever you want to call it, light, clarity, understanding, compassion, love, divinity, wherever you're coming from, whatever you're doing, all this can naturally, effortlessly, and this is the key, effortlessly come out and live. We can live from that space. So all the other models that we were looking at for inquiry, we looked through them, we looked at those questions, we got inspiration. We started doing our own questions. We started seeing where those questions were actually pointing to or pointing towards. Tanya and I did a lot of work together to understand how was this, you know, being experienced by our clients. And slowly but surely, these questions started manifesting. And we started noticing that the key to the power and success of IBC was the question, what is it that you miss? What is it that you're not able to notice when you're sequestered and veiled, taken over by this assumption or this issue or that understanding? And if we were able to kindly allow inner space for the first amygdala response, the quick mind, to come over and say, yeah, you should do this, and that, because we've been living like that for forever, right? It's not proven to be very positive. But if we could hold the space for the amygdala response to subside and then go deeper inside and notice, what is it that we were missing? What is it that, what are we missing that's already there, that we don't need to do anything to get, no strategy, no effort, no wanting, that's already there. I just can't see it because my vision, my perception of the world is sequestered by these assumptions. What is it that we can see now, right? And that's when the doors open. And if we remain in that space for enough time, we start noticing that there is no problem at all. And that's how we gently land into zero space.
And how did you notice that this question, what do I miss? Did you realize it when you asked the clients and then you saw the results, or how came this into place?
Yeah, we asked the clients, we started noticing, and also following up all tradition of what we consider to be worthwhile traditions of personal transformation, ancient and modern. It was very consistent that this self energy, this zero space, this innate light, however we want to call it, naturally arises when we remove what's getting in the way. So traditionally, we've been trained to build on things. I need to achieve this, and we construct. And we generally use a constructivist approach to things.
Yes.
If I want to achieve something, a goal, okay, I need A, B, C, D, and I construct. The thing with inner freedom is that it's not about layering up things. That complicates things more. It's about unlayering, giving space, removing the layers, the assumptions, the stories, the projections, the anticipations, removing them. And as we remove, it's like a geyser. It's like water, warm, delicious water just bursting out from our heart. That's what remains, okay? So if we ask, what do you miss? What are we doing? We're saying, okay, thank you. You know, the little rock that's over here that doesn't let the water flow. Okay, thank you. What's behind you? Oh, there's nothing. And what's behind you? Oh, there's nothing. And what's behind you? Oh, there's nothing. And oh my goodness. And then guess what? In this process, suddenly there's nothing that opposes the geyser. There's nothing that opposes the flow of this warm, delicious, wonderful essence that we are, right? So that's how we started noticing. So all true transformational methods in our experience are deconstructive, not a constructivist approach. Constructivism builds on adds, and the adding gets in the way.
And then so it was a process, or it was just when, okay, because IBC is a cyclical questions. You have 4 or 5 questions. What happens with, and then what do you miss, and then the new part. So it is a circle way. How the design. I realized when I asked the questions, and in the design of these 10, 12 questions that is IBC, and they are so constricted, like in the curveflexion, that the curve, little curve, it's always a little curve, and you think it's right, but it's a little curve, and then you go cyclical, like a spiral down. And I love the construction, that the questions are so constructed, so designed, that they are guiding you gently, soft, without resistance, really extremely soft. So always supporting, but then you come to the source. So and there is identity work in it, and there is the all pattern and programming work, and the beliefs, and all the validation things. So how, my question is, how was it the process that how all these 12 questions came into place, or it was just now it is here, or did you see, oh, this worked, and then we added this and we added this, and how did it work?
Yeah, it was a lot of laboratory work, as in practice. There was a lot of work in practice. And there was a lot of back and forth in the process of noticing what is it that actually worked. So, and it's been used nowadays, it's used by, I don't know, thousands of people probably around the world. And the essence of it was what's evident and what needs to be seen, what's evident and what needs to be seen in this slowly curving into the center of the source, in this cycle of it's not a cycle, because it doesn't actually repeat itself. It's more of a spiral, as you were mentioning, where you do not repeat the process entirely the same, and at the same time you go deeper and deeper into your own zero space. So when you see the first section of the parts are to really connect with the issue. And this is something that we've learned from psychology, especially around memory reconsolidation. We cannot rewrite our hard drive or our RAM or whatever you want to call it. We cannot rewrite it without connecting, without really feeling the original discomfort, without really going into this original discomfort. That doesn't mean, this is this is for, to suffer and liberate yourself through suffering. No, the contrary. But we do need to connect with the wound. We do need to connect to the wound and to the parts that are wounded inside of us. And as we do that, and the first big questions, the first 3 sub questions are around that. When you connect with this issue, when this is showing up, when this is activated, what shows up for you? Thoughts, images, questions. Who do you turn into? Who do others turn into in your mind? How is it that the world is transformed around you, literally, when you're making these assumptions, right? Then it's about patterns. It's about what happens to you. How do you, what goes on inside when you're making these assumptions. So how do you exaggerate, disconnect, freeze? What patterns show up when you're making these assumptions, right? And then how are you contributing to this yourself? One question that I'm asking off the cuff, also at that level, that I'm including more and more nowadays is when you're validating all this stuff that's happening, what assumptions are you making? What assumptions are you making about yourself? What assumptions are you making about the world, the universe, others, your environment, your peers, your work, etc. And then notice something, and this is very powerful, Marcus. We first connect to the wound, to the issue. Then we notice the impact that this issue is having, and that this blinding that's producing in ourselves is having. You know, I often, when I teach, I equate this to the VR sets that we put on, right, for virtual reality. And if you go on the YouTube and you watch some of those videos where people are with the VR sets trying to find their way, they bump into stuff, into others, they break the TV, they destroy their artwork because they're, you know, trying to do their best, but they're in a different environment than what they imagine they are. So for me, it's very, very similar. The nature of our being human is that we have all these assumptions. We call them assumptions, we call them algorithms, we call them beliefs, we call them whatever we call them, that are clouding who we are. And no wonder we're bumping into each other, and no wonder we're hurting people without even noticing. No wonder people are hurting us without noticing, because we're blind, right? So we get to that point where we go, okay, this is the issue, this is the pain, this is the impact that the pain is having in me. When I'm consumed by this, and most of us are, in all the courses that we offer, we always ask, how much of your energy is consumed by these patterns? Open question after a few days in the practice, and people report, honestly, Marcus, between 70 to 90%. 70 to 90% of our energy is consumed and sequestered by these cycles, right? So we get to a point where we ask, and this is a key question, when you're validating this issue, what is it that you're missing? When you're validating the patterns, when you're validating this transformation, what are you missing? And what that does, and then there's another very, very important instruction there that I always add, you know, don't try to answer this question from your mind, from your imagination. Just open up to the question and wait. Wait. When we're asking that question, it's very important to make that emphasis, because as we open to the question, we let the reactive response go by. You know, oh, you should do this, you just let the reactive response go by. We don't go to imagination, don't go to rationalization, and we open up. And guess what happens? We connect. We connect with an incredibly powerful force of understanding, intuition, and vision, that it's already there, and that is part of our zero space. And so we go, oh, what do I miss when I'm validating this stuff and the past and the assumptions and the drama and this and that? What am I missing? What am I missing that's already there for me? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm missing this, I'm missing that. So what we're doing is removing. And the more we do that, the more bright, shiny zero space that we bump into. And then we move into, what would your life be if you were not validating this issue as you are? And then we move into what is now clear, fresh, exciting, right? And we get to a point where we ask, where are you at now? Right? After going through the cycle, the first spiral cycle, we always ask, where are you starting 0 to 10? And then where are you ending 0 to 10? And if it's not a 0, we keep going with the spiral, and we do the same questions with what remains. And if we finish and it's not a 0, we keep going until we get to 0. And 0 is an extraordinarily powerful experience of connection, groundedness, understanding, and expansion that we all are able to recognize as our primordial essence, as the space that we are intended to inhabit in this world. And so, as you were saying, the questions point inwards, and down, inwards and down, inwards and down, inwards and down. And we finish a cycle and we start another one if we're not at zero until we get to zero. And we don't give discounts. If you get to a point where you say, oh, it's a 0.2, go for the 0.2. Go for the 0.00001. Go for absolutely anything that remains. And then get to that zero. And my recommendation, and I think the most important thing to remind ourselves of, was when we get to zero, the last thing we want to do is try to hold on to that space, because those are, we're getting back to attachment, and we're getting back to trying to hold on to it, right? So my recommendation is 2 words: recognize zero space and relax into it. Recognize zero space and relax into it. Recognize zero space and relax into it. And we recognize zero space in the way we recognize someone that's walking on the street, and we happen to know, oh, that's you. Oh, the same we do for zero space. Oh, that's zero space. Oh, that's zero space. We recognize, and then it's try to grab onto it. We relax into it. We recognize and relax into it. And what I tell my clients is, the more you get to zero space, the more you get to recognize zero space, and the more you get to relax into zero space, the more zero space is going to become your daily nature, your daily embodiment, your daily, the space from where you live every day. And as we stabilize that, our lives get profoundly transformed. And if we keep holding the recognition and the relaxation into the zero space, there comes a point where there's no more work needed. The essence has identified so strongly with reality, with this plane, with this absence of obstruction, with this absence of algorithm, with this direct understanding and connection with life, that there is no more need for work, and life becomes an absolute joyride. And we all know when we get there. And as long as there is a 0.00001% or 1 remaining, we just go back and go back.
Yeah. You know the story with the princess with the 100 mattresses, and she finds this little little piece, and that is still poking.
Exactly. So we need to go find that little, what is it, a pea or a seed or something, a little pebble.
Yeah. And I realized in my coachings that when we go there in these tiny little things that we, oh yes, I'm over it, then it goes up. Then this is the most important, and also the delicious one.
Yes, because it may appear to be a P, or it may appear to be a 0.001, but when we move into it, it unfolds, right? It really shows what's holding. It really shows what's the true burden. It really shows how it's manifesting. And we find all kinds of wonderful things behind that. So we keep going. And as I often say to my clients, what else is there to do? What else?
What else?
What else is there to do? There's just this undoing until there's no more undoing to do. That's it, right?
And yes, you answered also a little bit, but my next question would be, how can we sustain this? Mm-hmm. And also come to the origin of IBC is that you said once, you said to me that it is not only inquiry, mm-hmm. There is more into it, and because this non-dual thing, the non-duality, and mm-hmm. Because it is from dual, comes back to the source of zero. Mm-hmm. How do you see this method IBC included as a practice, a daily practice, that where you can live the non-dual path, and how is it constructed or designed in the IBC, the non-duality, and how can we sustain this?
Yeah. Yeah, IBC is inspired and was guided by the original great traditions of non-duality. IBC is, in essence, an applied methodology, non-dual methodology. And well, it starts being dual, of course, and it delivers non-duality. The way it does that is every aspect that separates us from our everything that shows up inside that gets in the way of this non-dual expression of who we are, you know, is something that requires attention. And I think this is key, Markus, in the effects and the power and the results and the effectiveness of IBC, because traditionally in life we have been trained to understand that it's something's just getting in the way, something's bothering us. We need to extricate it. We need to get rid of it. We need to operate it. We need to remove, right? We see that in the world all around us. We see that in medicine. We see that. And in many cases, it makes sense. You need to remove something when something needs to be removed. The world inside operates in a completely different structure of principles. Some call it, you know, the inner laws of interaction or physics or this or that. The essence of it is very clear. You don't get rid of your pain by pushing it away. You don't get rid of your pain by ignoring it. You don't get rid of your pain by imposing a positive into a negative. You don't. You just empower the negative more. And that's the 2-for-1 paradox in reflection in the book that you have behind you. The 2-for-1 paradox is basically the more you push, the less you're going to get. Yay, that one. The more you push, the less you're going to get results or spaciousness or access to non-duality, because
this is paradoxical. This is a paradox.
The more you try to push towards healing, the more resistance you're going to get around healing. And we've all experienced that, I think, at some point or another, especially if we're interested in personal development. We go in there with what we call the champagne approach, which is, you know, yes, we're, you know, let's go do this, you know, you're valid, you're valuable, you can do this, and then the champagne goes, and then what happens? Then the bubbly stops, and then we go, oh, and what is it that we were doing? We're pushing against, you know, some depression, some anxiety, some whatever issue. We're pushing with the positive, right? Positive thinking. We're pushing. Guess what? That's only going to make this pain stronger, because the essence of healing pain is not to push it aside, fix it. It's to witness and update. Witness and update the pain. And that's what we do in IBC. When we go, what is it that you can't see? Oh, update. Oh, update. Oh, right? And it's just a matter of seeing. There's no cajoling, there's no pushing. It's just a matter of seeing deeply, and you remain there. And the other aspect that you were saying, how do we stay there? It's just practice. It's just practice and self-compassion and kindness. And one of the, and we'll talk about this as well at some point. One of the things that we consider was an amazing addition to IBC is this understanding of our different identities inside. And that's also in reflection. I originally, when I wrote reflection 10 years ago, I originally experienced these identities as literal skippers, as if my, you know, body or soul or mind or soul was a vessel, a boat, and suddenly I had this skipper. It is like a dissociative identity issues where you have this entire personality taking over that has a particular view of life, that makes decisions on certain values, on certain expectations, on certain understandings of life. And then by the grace of God, suddenly it changes into something completely different. And now someone else is running the insides. And sometimes it's not that simple or that easy. Sometimes we have a skipper that is polarized with another skipper, and they're pushing themselves one side to the other. And that's when we don't know what to do. And that's when we don't understand what's going on. And that's when we're undecided, or we make a decision one day and then we regret it with our whole being the other day, things like that. So this is another very important element to this work, because when we interact with our inner world, we're interacting with those different identities, and we need to know this for healing to happen. If we treat all these identities in the same way, if you just try to push them around to, get rid of them, they're going to get stronger and they're going to get more powerful. And that's why in many traditions, there is this phenomenon that's called the dark night of the soul, where you're working with yourself and you're connecting with zero space and you're seeing a lot of light. And then there's a crumbling inside. There's a deconstruction inside. And it's so deep and so profound that sometimes we wonder, if whatever we're doing, is it worthwhile, or if what we've been doing has served us in any purpose. But in my own experience now, from this perspective, what's crumbling is these identities are coming into crisis. These inner identities are coming into crisis because things are shifting and moving inside. And for them, they have had to create very structured models of understanding of life internally and externally to be able to operate and to be able to serve us and serve our system. But when we start doing this work, sometimes these inner identities, or we can call them parts, or we can call them whatever works for you, they need to be seen, they need to be heard, they need to be understood, and they need to find their way back to their original intent. We all are born with an original intent for all these parts inside of us, and through the years, this intent starts being modified because these identities need to tend to address issues that are important, hold pain, hold trauma, help us to see things clearly. And as they do that, they get into contrived situations, and then we can't get them out of those situations if we don't have enough awareness and there's not enough zero space or light or self energy, whatever we want to call it. So this is also very, very important, and it's part of the model now, this awareness and understanding of all these different parts of us, all these different identities, all these different skippers that we need to be able to connect with.
We can go to these parts work, to these identities in the next question, and I want to come back to this non-dual thing of IBC, how we relate to these parts or to the beliefs that we have or to the assumptions. How is it non-dual? Is it by allowance? You said, okay, we don't push it away, but now how is it designed in the IBC process that there is the non-dual thing, the 1 + 1 is 1, or the non-dual depolarization, we can say? Is it by just allowance and witness and seeing, or how is this designed in the non-dual part?
Yeah, so for IBC, the essence of non-duality is accessing and operating from zero space. And the way that we approach and use to access zero space is by removing. It's a removal process, right? Not this, not that. That's a very It's an Advaita meditation that's, very,
Not
very
this,
old.
not that, not.
Not this, not
Mhm.
that, not this, not that. What remains? Oh, this, not that too. What remains? Oh, this, not that
Mhm.
too. So
Uh-huh.
what remains? Uh, uh, And then when we go, oh, and the question could be, right, who am I?
Yeah.
This, answers the
Good.
mind. Not that, not deep enough, not clear enough, not profound enough, not transcendental enough. Okay, so the mind comes up with, oh, this, or a part, or an identity comes up with, oh, this, then we're this. No, not deep enough, not
But
powerful enough.
there is nothing that can arise that will sustain.
Exactly. And so you notice that, and this is the essence of IBC, because when we're asking, what do you miss? What are you not able to notice? What we're doing is, oh, excuse me, oh, excuse me.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. What is it that I miss? What is it that I cannot see? What is it that I cannot access? That's already there. And the essence of the answer to that question is what is already there that you cannot access is absolute profound bliss that we call zero space, or however you want to call it. And it's already there. You don't need to construct it. You don't need to make it up. You don't need to add something into somewhere. You just allow yourself to go into this space, and from this space, all questions are answered. That's the essence of how we get into
Because for me,
non-doing.
for myself, this is one of the biggest advantages of IBC, that
Mhm.
that it is experiential and accessible immediate, and it is effortless in this
Absolutely.
non-dual thing, and I don't have to do anything again, and it is really, and this experience, isn't that experience that we all long for in the whole world? When you see the whole world how it is, isn't that also that we all, everybody and every part of us is longing for that, so we make it accessible.
Exactly. Every single one of them. There's a little bit of a paradox here, right? Because we say we we can access zero space without adding anything, and then there's all this talk about effortlessness and
Yeah.
undoing, and at the same time, there are 5 questions with some sub questions and this and that, and you sit with someone else, or you facilitate yourself, or you download the IBC app, or there's a doing. So there's a doing, and there's a little bit of effort in the doing, but at the same time, we're talking about non-effort and non-doing, right? So
Yes.
this is how this is understood. There's the doing into the non-doing. There is a way to do stuff into a non-doing. If you leave yourself on the couch watching Netflix and expecting that you're going to access zero space or even sustain the experience of zero space, probably is going to be very, very difficult. I don't know. There's been some spontaneous events in history, but I think they're counted in one single hand. What I'm trying to say is there's a dedication that delivers effortlessness. Without this commitment, you're not going to get to the effortlessness, and you're not going to get to the
Yeah.
deliverance, right? So just to point that out as a note. And this practicing may seem an effort at the beginning, but the more we recognize and relax into, remember those two,
Yes.
the more we recognize and relax into, the less effort, the less need to even practice,
Yeah.
and the more self-emanating it becomes. There are a few little tricks that the mind plays as well. We have some very powerful identities or parts that are very, very zero space-like, and may be trying to convince you, oh, you're there. Oh, you're
Like an
there. You don't need to
observer.
do anything, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be aware of those, and that's just part of the practice. And we need to, as we find them and we make friends with them and we understand them, again, not trying to ignore them. There's another very powerful exercise in reflection that I call the canvas exercise, and that's a profound principle in personal transformation. The canvas exercise is about imagining yourself as a blank canvas, as a blank paint canvas. If you're an artist and you're just a blank, white, beautiful canvas. And you have all these identities or thoughts or parts in you or things that are showing up that want to be seen, that want to be witnessed, that want to be acknowledged for their hard work, for their dedication within. And so the exercise is about just allowing, sitting there as a canvas. And you can even visualize or imagine that each one of these parts or identities or thoughts are they're given some paint and a brush, and then you allow yourself to receive without any expectation of this removing any pain, because then it has an agenda, right? When we go into that space, oh, okay, I'm going to allow you to come in and paint all over me, but then I'm going to be happy, or no, just allowing and witnessing and noticing, and allowing and witnessing and noticing. And if we focus on the allowing, the witnessing, and the noticing, we are delivered into zero space. But if we go into, as in most non-dual models of transformation, if we go into the process without a particular agenda or a particular expectation out of the process, it tends to go the other way. It tends to get more complicated, right? It's like when we sit in meditation and we're doing mindfulness. We sit in meditation and we're doing mindfulness, and we try to push, the thought away, or the identity away, or the part away. Probably we can get a little bit of zero space, because there is some space, but we're not healing. We're not healing the identity. We're not healing the inner trauma. We're not healing the source of the discomfort, right? So it is not until we heal the skippers, it is not until we heal the parts that they relax into their own essence. And when they relax into their own essence, they get out of the way of zero space. They get out of the way of the light, because they're healed now. Why is it that they're getting in the way?
We get contact with zero.
Exactly. Why are they getting in the way of zero? Because they need our attention. They want to be seen. They want to be liberated. They want to be healed. And what's one of the best ways to get our attention? Anxiety, dread, panic, depression. That's gonna get your attention. And this comes to the point where, look also at what we're doing with these emotions. There's some noise here. What we're doing with these emotions, we're doing the contrary to what we should be doing. We are trying to get rid of them, push them away.
Yeah,
exactly, right?
What I realized when I practiced for now 10, 12 years, inquiry, and I realized with IBC, it gave such an explosion to really to get into zero, and to bring this as a goal in a no-goal practice. So this is the non-dual part. So I realized, okay, now I can sustain the zero. And then what I realized is that it's not loving what is, I was receiving what is. I was receiving what is. So I was really laying down and was so, beautiful expansion and wide and supportive, and I could sustain it. It was amazing. And I realized, and I felt it. There was also a part of myself that said, oh, that's great. So it is, but at the end, it is a passive way. It is a passive of receiving. And what in the non-dual thing is, I cannot do without non-doing, and I cannot not doing without doing.
Exactly.
So it is an action required. And this is what I love also about IBC. What is next? What is what action required? Because out of zero, there is an action. You cannot only receive and be happy and easy. I am fine and you are. No, this is the Bodhisattva game. And how do you see how we can? It is also the non-dual thing for me. The doing in the non-doing. And the experience the non-dual zero out, and then do out of it. It's an action. Love is an action. It is something that we do, not only that we that we are. So how we combine the doing and the being, This is,
Well, yeah. Well, it turns out that the doing, when we are in, um, let me put it this way, when we get to zero space, the doing manifests naturally. It is self-evident.
yeah,
It is not driven by agenda, goal setting, purpose, expectations. It's just a manifestation of our essence, true purpose in this world. And you just see yourself in action. You don't
yeah,
drive yourself to action. You don't even, many people report not even planning things anymore. You just give yourself into the self-arising manifestation of your true essence, which is zero space, and action follows. Why? Because that's how we are designed. That's the concept. When we live from zero space, we move, we have legs, we speak, we connect. Trees are beautiful beings, but they're not moving. Of course we know they interact with themselves, but we're different in that way, and we have all these qualities. And so many people report that when living from zero space and being able to abide from zero space, all stress around action dissolves, and they've never been more active in their life. They speak about being able to manage 2 jobs and have time for family and friends and connecting, and then time for relaxing, and then time for thinking and understanding and keeping their practice going, because there's no resistance. Projection, anticipation, and planning build resistance, and they build a secondary dialogue and a secondary pool of resources inside, where is it going to happen, not going to happen, I need to be careful of this, oh, that person's showing up now, oh, that other thing may happen, oh my gosh, there's a recession, oh, the markets are this, etc., etc. When you live from a non-agenda, mind-driven, dualistic, strategic model, and you're living from zero space, you're living from a form of emanation that transcends all that. And you're not being consumed. Your energy is not being consumed by the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. You know who you are. You know what shows up from you. You know what your offering is for the others. And it's just a matter of noticing, where is this offer being received and by whom? And if it's not being received, we move. We kindly move to the next, to the next, to the next, until there is a space or an environment that sustains and receives what we need to offer. And that's it. And when we find that space, we can grow it. It can be all kinds of shapes, sizes. We're just there. And you see, and then there's this effortlessness or non-doing that many traditions speak about, while you are fully engaged, while you are fully connected, while you are fully active, while you are fully delivering what your essence brings into this world from a space of freedom.
And then all the parts inside myself, they are aligned and they support each other. And yes. And let's talk a little bit about these other blockages or assumptions to the part works inside. What's getting in the way, and how, when there's a bliss coming, then I realize that they work together. All parts work together as a team.
Yes. Our identities, our parts, our skippers, however we want to call them, have an original intent that is positive to the system. People that do parts work often mention that there are no bad parts. Richard Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, uses that title in his book lately. And what does that mean? That means that no skipper is an ill-intended one. That doesn't mean that probably they got into trouble, probably they've been pushing around parts a lot, probably they've been creating some secondary suffering. But what's essential to understand is that the roles that identities take are for the purposes of supporting and alleviating the system, who we are, at some point in our life when we had a challenge and we did not have enough access to zero space or self-energy, or we didn't have the maturity to deal with something. And there's a lot of talk about healing, because that's what we do. Now, IFS is a tradition started in psychology. It's grown in psychology and therapy, has started to moving out of that holding space, and it's now moving a little bit more into a practice, and I'm working very, very, very hard on that. Moving as a practice, moving into the space of coaching, moving into the space of personal transformation, rather than just being a psychological therapeutic modality. And what happens?
Internal family system, IFS, internal
IFS.
family system. So there is
Yes.
a big whole family inside.
There's a whole family inside. And again, the creator of internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, started working with people back in the 80s, and how he realized that we had parts inside was because he was working with some clients, and then he heard the typical expression, a part of me would like to do this, but a part of me doesn't. We can all recognize that in our lives, in ourselves. And what Richard did is he just got curious and started asking these questions. In my own experience, without knowing anything about IFS, I bumped into this phenomenon as well about 10 years ago.
Me too. Yeah.
And for me, they were, as I was saying, they were like skippers. And it turns out, Markus, and I had a lot of clues back then 10 years ago about how is it that this internal family, or this internal group of skippers, or this internal group of identities actually manifest, and how to interact with them, and what to expect from them, and what they're looking for, and how is it that we can give them what they're looking for so they can alleviate the pain that they're carrying and the suffering. So a very important component to IBC is, who am I when I'm asking the questions? Who's answering? Inside. I can make the questions, and if I have an active skipper that hates this and prefers that and doesn't like the other thing, probably I'm going to get those kinds of answers from that particular identity, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the beauty about IBC is that it doesn't matter who we start with in terms of interacting internally with which skipper is on duty. It doesn't really matter which skipper is on duty when you start the conversation, because you end up in zero space, right? Now, the part that we need to do a little bit more in IBC is to acknowledge this part, to acknowledge their effort, to acknowledge their dedication, to acknowledge their commitment to the system. Try to identify what's their true intent, what's their true purpose before the burden, before the pain, before the trauma. And as we do that and bring this light into the system through zero space or self-energy, we unburden the pain by witnessing, by noticing what is it that I can't see that's already there. That's that question in IBC. And as we liberate parts, they become harmonized internally. So an analogy I use a lot is this book called The Lord of the Flies. It's apparently, I've heard lately that it was inspired in true events. There's this big schooner boat, mega boat, mast and everything, old style boat with some school-aged kids that runs aground at some point somewhere in the ocean, and they end up all in an island. And there's only the students. No adult survives. No adult makes it to the island, right? And how is it that this group of kids with limited understanding in life, in organization, in politics, in survivalism, et cetera, how they manage to, with their limited resources, how is it that they manage to survive? And it's a very similar analogy, because we all have this experience internally. We all have these innocent skippers or parts that we're born with, that have a beautiful intent, is the innocence of being young or being a kid, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's something that happens, you know, a rejection, a big trauma with capital T, small but consistent trauma, complex trauma that starts pushing these inner identities, these parts, into situations where they need to take on the pain and the burden for the system to be able to move forward.
To
And
survive.
by taking on this pain and this burden, they remove it from the immediacy of your interaction with life, and that's how we survive, but they remain with the pain. They remain with the pain. And then we start developing parts and skippers that are managers of that pain, and then they push the pain aside more and more. But then the pain doesn't recede, and the part that's holding the pain wants to not hold the pain. The part that's holding the pain wants to live their true purpose, right? So they start pushing the buttons of, you know, alert, you know, anxiety and disconcert and dread, et cetera, et cetera. They start pushing the buttons because they want to be seen, they want to be heard. And so that's how we come in with, and that's how we interact. And this links with the canvas experience, canvas exercise, because we go inside to see, to witness, to acknowledge the hard work, to see. And as we do that from a witnessing space, parts go, and who are you? And suddenly, if we come in with zero space or self-energy, suddenly it is as if a wise, wonderful teacher or parent shows up to that island to alleviate the anxiety of all these kids trying to survive, trying to govern themselves, trying to find, you know, resources, et cetera, et cetera. It's that release and the updating of the part into knowing, oh, there's light inside. There is someone that takes care of things. There is this power. There's this zero space. There's this self-energy that is the source of all healing. I can let go of my pain. I don't need to carry this burden anymore. I can release the pain that I've been carrying for so many years, because there's an adult in the room now internally. There's a parental figure now, however it shows up for you. There's a parental figure now. There's an inner leader inside that is now available to support it, however it shows inside for you. There is this presence now, and then parts start being able to go, oh, right? And what happens when parts relax? Spaciousness. And what happens when we get spaciousness? The light shines. Zero space, self-energy, Buddha nature, a clear mind, whatever you want to call it.
I realize that when they get in contact with zero space, with the adult, the burden they carried move naturally away. It is, it is moving. And then they take off a new role, a new idea, not a new, their original purpose.
Exactly.
And what I really love about this is that they are unconscious. So they do the job. It's not the ego or me that has to do. They are happy to do this job now for us, and they do it 24 hours a day without noticing us. That's
powerful.
That's powerful.
That's powerful. That's powerful. That's powerful. I remember that started happening to me when I started going inside with this vision of understanding of my skippers and my parts, that as they were unburdened, as they were seen, as they were healed, as they were updated to who we really are right now, and the capacity that we have from zero space, from self-energy. And then I asked them, you know, what do you want to do now? And then they just said, I want to keep sharing this with everybody, even if you're not around, even if you're asleep, even if you're blah, blah, blah. And then another part followed that. And when I got to another part, and then they did the process, and another part followed that. And then there were 10, 15, 20 parts in this mutually supportive endeavor within themselves that were sharing light, even if I was not around, even if I was working on something else, even if I'm having a conversation. Actually, I know right now, while I'm chatting with you, Markus, they're doing that work. And that generated in me an experience of a lot, like alleviation of this, dread that I had experienced since I was a kid because of early trauma, right? And it just started happening. So it is quite beautiful to see what roles they now take when they don't have to carry this burden, when they don't have to hold on to the pain. And they're all good roles in the sense they're all sustaining and supporting of zero space and self energy. And so the more we connect with them, the more we heal them, the more we alleviate our parts, our skippers, our identities, the more harmony internally. And the less we do, the more we try to push them away, the more resistance. And that's a 2-for-1 paradox we shared. And sadly, in many traditions, and I was caught myself in one of those circles, especially in the mindfulness tradition, the way I understood at some point mindfulness was that I would, focus my attention on something, and if a thought showed up, in this case, it is, a skipper or a part. If anything showed up, I would acknowledge, without pushing away, and this was a tricky part, but I would acknowledge and I would return to my breath or to my focus of meditation. And even though the approach was relatively kind, as in not, violently pushing away, there's a subtle being ignored. There's a subtle being ignored. There's a subtle, I'm not seeing you, I'm not witnessing you, I'm not connecting with you. I'm going back. And the incredible irony there is that it doesn't end up working. As if we ignore our skippers and our parts, they go, okay, okay, okay. And guess what? If they kind of get in the way, or they kind of go to sleep, or we kind of ignore them, probably they're going to, and the more we meditate, the more we ignore them, or the more we don't connect with them, probably they're going to go, okay, no point. And probably we're going to experience some zero space, or some self energy, or some clear mind, whatever you're, but we're not healing the identities. We're not healing the skippers and their burdens. We're not healing the trauma. So we can get ourselves into a situation where we feel, pretty cool. I'm in zero space. But the origin of that zero space is not true inner harmony. Yeah. So when we're in that situation, even though we can feel the experience of zero space, if something comes up that wakes those parts up, if there's some other kind of trauma or sickness or challenge or anxiety that, brings in some intensity into the system, those parts, because they haven't healed and they're dormant with their pain, when they wake up, you are going to have a wild, intense, not fun ride. And many, in my own experience, that is very similar to what we were talking about, the dark night of the soul. I think many of us that have gone through those phenomenons of suddenly having those experiences that are so intense is because we have been removing parts from the way in ways that do not heal the parts. We have been making space within in ways that are not producing the end harmonization of the parts that are getting in the way. And so if something happens, there's a major shift, a change, then the whole thing crumbles again, right? So that's why it's so important to be aware of these identities, to be aware of these parts, and to be aware of these principles, because we need to come in and heal. We need to come in and witness. We need to come in and appreciate the hard work, the dedication, the commitment from those parts towards the system for taking on that pain, for taking on that trauma, for taking on that terrible experience when you were 3 or 2 or 7 years old, right? And being able to hold it in a space where it wasn't a devastating effect to your system, and you were able to continue. And now they don't need to do this anymore. And not only because you're an adult, Markus, and you're capable and you're mature, not only because of that, but because you now have access to zero space or self-energy. And that is a healing agent. That is a healing agent, not the therapist, not the practitioner. Okay? The healing agent is zero space. The healing agent is self-energy. The healing agent is this profound source of clarity, empowerment, understanding, or whatever you want to call it, right? So that's the true adult in the room. You know, it's not that me, now 50 years old, can go back and yeah, I can alleviate the suffering of this 6-year-old that lost mother and brother in a car accident while being in the car, and it was devastating and crushing at 6 years old to your life. Not only I in my 50s can go back and bring this 6-year-old into a safer space, but if I go in zero space or self-energy, I am not the one that is conducting the healing, this other manager inside. The healing is being done by the essence that holds all clarity, that holds all understanding, that holds all resources inside. And that's how they liberate, right? So the teacher that shows up on the island, going back to that analogy, that's not even a teacher. It is self-energy incarnated. It is zero space in action, right?
So you said that the new part that IFS gave to IBC was really to get to know these parts as subconscious entities, as personalities. Yeah. So we get to know, we give them names, and then you know them. And this is the new part. And I want to ask you, how is IFS and IBC working together? And for myself also, it is because IFS is a psychotherapy, it's a therapy, and inquiry is really as we said, a non-dual approach of getting into zero to self-energy. It is and for myself, this inquiry with IBC and this parts work combined, this gives a miracle. And it is different. It is different than IFS as a psychotherapy. It is something else, and they are very close. It is the same. But when we combine inquiry with the non-dual part and the questions, and this IFS model, we talk to parts because it is naturally coming. When you do IBC, the parts, the identities come up naturally, so they are there. So we have now some a way to communicate with these parts. How is then IFS included into IBC in this inquiry model that we do in Innerland Institute?
Yeah. So prior to IFS, we had been doing a lot of work with identities in our retreats, and we were very, very clear that we had some inner actors, in manifesting internally. What I think IFS brought into the mix that was somewhat of a missing link for us was all this understanding of how to further interact with our different identities and understand their overall intent and purpose, right? We were very clear that we had parts or skippers. We were working around that. We were doing IBC with them. We were asking the questions towards them. We were identifying who were the most active, et cetera, et cetera. What IFS does is IFS is helped us understand what is the inner architecture of parts. What is it that they really need, and how to interact specifically with them to alleviate and unburden their suffering, right? And that's what we bring now into our programs and into our whole conception of transcendence. The beauty of IFS and IBC is that they sync very, very well, because they both have the understanding of zero space, and what in IFS is called self-energy. And I would say they are exactly the same thing. If you were to read descriptions of both, they are exactly the same thing. We call it zero space, they call it self-energy. And the importance of self-energy and zero space as a healing agent, not the therapist, not the practitioner, not the methodology, is key. And that's why there's so much similarity between the models. Other models of inquiry that we've used in the past had no reference to anything remotely similar to this source of clarity and power and understanding, right? But that is present in IFS, and so the idea is with Tanya, both and I got trained in IFS to really understand the subtleties of this inner interaction between parts, around parts, skippers, identities, however you want to call it, and get more clear on the inner architecture of the model. You know, how is it that it exists, but more importantly, understanding what these identities, these skippers and these parts, what's their essence, what drives them, what is it that they want, and give it more emphasis, Markus. I think that's key. Before, when we were practicing IBC, we were practicing on the emphasis was get to zero space, get to zero space, get to zero space, and that is the emphasis still. Nevertheless, now we know that you don't get to zero space through ignoring parts, that the work to getting to zero space needs to include the awareness of skippers, parts, identities, needs to include the awareness of how is it that they work, needs to include the awareness of how is it that they're understood, what they were looking for, and how is it that we unburden them. When we do IBC, we naturally do what in IFS is called unblending. Okay, when a part takes over the seat of consciousness, when a skipper grabs onto this to the helm, to the wheel of the boat, right, we say we're blended. And what IBC does very, very powerfully and very quickly and immediately is when we're really blended with a part, when there's not enough space for us to see that that is a part, we sit down, we do the IBC, and we get space. It's a very powerful way to get space, right? And then the more space you build, the more capacity for healing and unburdening, right? The more capacity for understanding what's going on inside, the more capacity for different parts to offer keys on what's happening. What's also very useful about IFS is that it classifies and understands certain parts according to their certain roles. So, for example, in IFS, there are parts that are clearly protectors of the system, of other more vulnerable parts. And those are divided into managers and firefighters. And the managers are the ones that keep, the ship going and anticipate and have the agenda and make sure this is happening. Their motto is something like, never again. We're never going to go through that pain again. We're never going to go through that vulnerability again. So they manage, right? Firefighters take care of pain by, getting us into binge eating or binge watching or, some other drugs or sex or this or that, in order to alleviate the pain. And then there's other parts that in an IFS model that they're called exiles, and those are the ones that are holding the pain. And the managers and the firefighters are moving around those exiles, right? If an exile is too active and there's too much pain, then probably a firefighter is going to jump in and find a way to alleviate that pain. If a manager jumps in, then the manager is going to say, move into that corner over there, or into that closet over there, or under that rock over there, because right now you're being too disruptive, right? So managers have good intentions. Firefighters have good intentions. Exiles have good intentions, even if all of them, sometimes what they do brings harm to the system. They have good intentions because they can only do what they do with the resources and the understanding they have, because they do not have access to zero space or self energy at the moment. They do not have access, and they just have to do with what they can. So if we come in and move into zero space and move into self energy, and from that connection and that embodiment of self energy, we interact with our parts and their burdens, they can get healed. In IFS, the model of unburdening parts is very particular, very powerful. Unburdening parts in the IFS model, I would say, requires, generally speaking, some support from a facilitator one-on-one. You need to check if protectors are okay with you accessing more vulnerable parts. My approach to unburdening, and it is more expensive. The model is more expensive because you need sessions one-on-one, and it doesn't hold itself very viable to a self-practice. My suggestion or my experience is that there is this phenomenon called spontaneous unburdening. And spontaneous unburdening, in my perspective and from my experience, is directly related to the amount of consistent zero space access or self energy that's in the system. When we have enough self energy and we have enough zero space access, protectors open up. They bring in, the exiles. They share what's going on. When there's not enough self energy or access to zero space, they don't trust us. They don't trust the system. They don't trust what we're doing. They just assume they're going to be pushed around, pushed away, violently try to remove them, et cetera, et cetera. So they hold their pain and they hold their access, right? But the more we connect with zero space, the more we connect with self-energy, the more we have spaciousness. When there's spaciousness, the more trust inside of the system. When there's trust inside of the system, the more our protectors are willing to open up and share and cooperate. And the more we get that going and the more resources we have, the more access to the pain we have as a healing agent internally. Yeah. Right? That doesn't mean, go in and try to force an exile out of its pain, because there is such a thing as backlash in what we do. And that means if we force things internally and we push too hard, we're going to get parts in the inside that are going to get really upset, really angry, and they're going to make us know that. So it is a very gentle, kind process. And the essence of it, in my experience, is just get to zero space. St. Augustine used to have a very popular phrase back in the Middle Ages, love and do what thou wilt, or do whatever you want. Love and do whatever you want, right? And that's the essence. Now, I just translate it into our context and I say, get to zero space and everything follows, right? Get to zero space and do what you want, in the sense of you'll know what's next, right? So that's my most important takeaway. Get to zero, get to self-energy, get to zero, get to self-energy, and get to zero and self-energy for the purposes of healing your skippers. Don't get to zero self-energy for the purposes of ignoring your skippers. Get to zero space and self-energy for the purpose of liberating, for the purpose of witnessing, for the purpose of connecting with, for the purpose of healing, your parts. And when parts hear, because parts can also make it difficult for you to access self-energy. For those of you that have a mindfulness practice and have been meditating for many years, you know how some days you have a terrible session and some days you have a wonderful session. And what gets in the way when you're having a terrible session is parts are not cooperating. Parts have an issue. Parts are showing up. Parts are blending. Parts are anxious, right? And so the model now includes this vision and this understanding of how our parts work and the transcendental implications of knowing this dimension internally. I've heard again and again from many IBC practitioners in many of the courses that we're now offering, introducing the model with IFS. This was the missing piece.
Yeah.
This was the missing piece. I've heard this again and again. For me, it was the missing piece. There was still, IBC still had a little bit of more emphasis to have around the awareness of parts and the awareness of their role and the awareness of how they work and the awareness of what is it that we actually need to do to alleviate them and to liberate them.
So we can sum up in one sentence that at least we confront the wound with zero. So,
we
connect.
We
confront, but we connect and we face, because everything, lots of parts will not allow that we connect or that we are there and we go to the wound. But there are so at least and IBC is one part, it's one methodology to get to zero. And then we sustain zero. And I realized to sustain zero, I do IBC, I do IBC, I do IBC, I get to sustain zero. It is so helpful to have IFS, the parts, to get to know the parts, to sustain. So the IFS part supports myself to sustain zero, and the IBC supports myself to get to zero. So, but without getting to zero and sustaining, IFS is, it is more difficult.
There's no transformation work without accessing zero space. There's no transformation work without being able to do that. And what we do is we bring the part in contact with zero space or self-energy, and we do that in as kind, gentle, loving, self-compassionate way as possible. We don't push parts around, and we wait until parts are able to trust that energy. If parts are not able to trust that energy, there's nothing going to happen. Parts are survivalist. Parts are professional. They can smell an agenda, miles away. Parts know what's going on in terms of that. Probably they don't know other things. Sometimes parts don't know who you really are or what they're doing, or they just know they have to do this job. But they very, very sensitive of further aggression or further being pushed around.
So yesterday I had a session. After 2 hours, we came to the conclusion. It was a huge, and then at the end, there is a safeguarding of a secret. And it is a secret that is carried for hundreds of years. It was so clear. And it will never, this part said, I will never give this secret. And just wait. And this was also a conclusion of the session. And he was so happy that he is not alone anymore. and so he has a safeguard, he's this guard, and he said, and everybody said, okay, we will not push you. We will not try to manipulate you that we get the secret, and this is difficult. This is difficult not to. Everybody wants to, but all the other parts were happy to see that, okay, it is not this destructor anymore. It is it's a little safeguard that keeps the secret for centuries. So
we will find incredible situations inside of us, different stories, burdens, understandings of reality, life. I've worked with parts that been carried for several incarnations, past lives. There's all the inner world unfolds in extraordinary ways. The space we have access to when we are doing this level of work is very similar to the space we have access to when we do plant work, or when we do when we have certain experiences that go beyond our everyday consciousness, because the world inside is so incredibly rich, and parts know. And there's often, I'm asked, how do I know I'm talking to a part? And I often say, when you connect with parts, it's not imagination, it's not rationalization. You're having a conversation. How do you know you have a conversation? Because you get an answer, and you cannot make up an answer. You get an answer, and then you further ask into that question, and you get another answer. And this new answer is not, something that is up for debate or something that you can make up in another way. It's just an answer, and then you follow that up, and then there's another answer, and then there's this huge conversation, which is coming from a particular node of understanding or awareness, of however you want to call it, that is very, very clear. Yes. On what they're going through, what they want, what life is, what they don't want, what is the problem, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how you're talking to an actual skipper or an identity or a part. In this world of parts work, there's a continuum in terms of understanding what parts or skippers or identities are. Some people believe that they're just sub-personalities of our main, personality, and we work with them symbolically, et cetera, et cetera. And some are on the other extreme and believe that these are fully,
real,
complex, inner, full beings, or whatever we want to call them, right? That live within, that live inside. Wherever you are, whatever works for you, and it's just about, I would recommend, make it work for you, however you experience this. It's about acknowledging these inner sources of awareness, of understanding of what life is, right? And working with them. So we're very, very happy that we found this, what we call this missing link to IBC. We're very, very happy to be including it in everything we do now. If IBC was already powerful, and if IBC was already, in many cases, profoundly transformational and mind-blowing, with IFS, it just becomes, incredibly more so.
Okay, yeah, and this, but besides rationalization and imagination, I realize there is a subtle, very, very important distinction we have to make in IFS, that there is also an observer. So when people, then the clients ask, and they see the part, and they talk, the other part is now doing this, the part is now doing this, but this is not the part talking. Mm-hmm. To make this distinction, that it is really the part, to listen to the part, and not to watch the part, observe it, and because in all our meditation and in mindfulness tradition, we are so, and Zen meditation, we meditate, and we have the observer identity also, an observeral identity in our process. But IFS says, really, just sit there and be with this part, and let the part speak out of itself. So how do you see this distinction, that we don't talk, how the part is feeling, and really see the parts talks?
Well, the principle is, can't remember the name of the author, but there's a book out there called Slow Mind, Fast Mind, or something like that. Don't quote me on this, but I'm trying to. So this is a principle. We have a quick mind, a fast mind, that's generally driven by the amygdala reflex, and generally driven by reactive survivalist models. We mostly live inside of that mind in our lives, 80, 90%, maybe 100%. It doesn't need to be intensely reactive or life-threatening. It's just reactive, assumption. As I was telling you at the beginning, most of the clients, when I ask them, how much energy goes into managing this, they say between 70 and 90%, right? So imagine that's the level. Yeah. And what we do with this energy is sorry, I lost track of your question. The
question was, well, really is that the part is really talking, and I observe the part.
Yeah. So we wait for the amygdala response. We let it pass. It's like a little wave, right? So when we ask a question inside, all the reactive parts that have survivalist, at the top of their, they go, oh, say this, or oh, this is it, or we've learned that, that's dangerous, so stay away. So, and there's research that says that this response, if we're, in a state of awareness and noticing, this response will last around 20 seconds. So you ask a question inside and, you get, oh, this, oh, that, oh, this, for about 20 seconds, and you just stay there. That's why when doing IBC, when we get to the question, what do you miss? What is it that you're not able to notice? I always include with my clients, ponder the question without trying to answer. What do you miss? What is it that you're not able to notice when you're validating this issue? And just stay there, open up and stay there and wait, right? So we just wait. And we let the first, kind of algorithm pass, and we go, oh, okay. And then we get an answer. And we can check. Okay, are you apart? And they're honest, they're clear. Yes, I am. If you want immediate, checking. If not, you just check that it's not something you're rationalizing or it's something that you're making up. When I say rationalizing, I mean, oh, this makes sense to answer, so I'm going to try to answer that to the question. Oh, right? The menu, this makes sense to answer. Or imagination is, oh, I could give another answer. I'm making it up so I could give another answer. So if it's not imagination, it's not rationalization. And the conversation, the dialogue is consistent. It feels as a dialogue. You are waiting for a response, and you are experiencing it as a response. And if you probe into the answer, you'll get more detail. And if you ask why, one of the key questions when you're doing IFS is how did you get into this role? Why are you doing this? How did you get this job? What happened, right? Oh, well, I was 6 years old. I got into a car accident. Mom died, brother died. And then we were kind of abandoned in the middle of the road. There was, back in the 70s in Mexico, there were no ambulances. They got into they got us into taxis. So, that's how I got my role, says the part. That's why when, you get sick or you go to hospital, everybody starts firing up inside, right? That's why, that's how it started. Okay, interesting. And then one of the things that I was noticing that was very interesting for me is I started noticing that my parts wanted to be put into written form. They wanted their stories to be told. They wanted to be witnessed and be seen and be whatever they were bringing put into the outside world or written down. And I downloaded an app on the iPhone, and I did a whole mind map about my parts. And I have like 75 parts that each have their own role. How did they get into that? What happened? And as they were liberated and they were let go of their burdens, what are their new roles? What is it that they now are doing? What was their original purpose or intent in the system? And it came to a point where there was just a sense of inner harmony that wasn't there before, ever. A sense of inner harmony that came from this witnessing and this harmonization and this acknowledgement of all the parts that I was able to explore. And so each of us are going to find it differently, how we interact with parts. I often comment and suggest that if it feels okay for your parts and it's something that's viable for your parts, you put it out there in writing, you download an app for mind mapping, and you use it or whatever, and then it's clearer. It's more clear that you're actually interacting with this independent, whatever you want to call it, being or aspect of your personality, right?
Oh, so thank you. It is so amazing to talk to you, and it helped me a lot, and also our spectators and people who watch this. And I have two final questions to you to sum up all of this, and I invite you to give a short answer in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences at the end. what in short, brief, what is IBC and what is IFS as one question. And the second is then I will ask them.
So in a nutshell, IBC is a methodology that allows us to access zero space through identifying what is getting in the way of the natural flow of zero space, of the natural access to zero space. And IFS is the model which help us understand how is it that what gets in the way exists within. What's the architecture of what gets in the way? How is it that it exists? What kind of interaction it needs, and what kind of environment, and how does it work? Combine those two, and there's an enormous amount of power there to be had.
Wow, thank you. So short. And then whom do you think, who are the people who are interested in, for whom, which people would you recommend to do an experience? When?
Anyone that takes self-transformation seriously, especially if you've been through 10 or 20 models that haven't worked for you. Especially if what we've discussed in this conversation piques your interest and you go, there's something there. Parts can hear, and self-essence can hear, and zero space can hear. So there's anything that moved you in this conversation, give yourself the gift of exploring that further, because we are seeing incredible transformation. We are seeing, exquisite, mind-blowing, never seen before transformation with the coming together of IBC and IFS. And yeah.
And you would also recommend, for example, for cancer, or when you have really pain in the stomach or in the back, really to focus and you would suggest also this?
Yeah, there's a lot of work that's been done with somatic situations or medical situations in both IBC and IFS. I was sick last year, very, very sick myself, very, very, very sick. It was a gastro thing, but I was sure I was on my way out of this world. How bad it was. And I was noticing that that's when a lot of my dormant parts that had not been, fully healed throughout my own process came up. So when parts are in harmony, they understand the nature of existence. They understand the nature of death, passing. They understand the nature of sickness. They start to feel a little bit, Buddhist in that way. They understand of old age. They just get it. They just get it. When they're harmonized, when they're unburdened, when they're liberated, they understand. When they're not, they're very, very anxious and very, very afraid and thinking that something horrible is going to happen. So nothing has given me more clarity, more depth, and more understanding than being able to address and hold the parts that were not still healed when I got sick last year, and actually be able to bring them the support that they needed. And from being in a very difficult, precarious situation, because the gastro condition that I had also produced all these kinds of gases that were messing up my serotonin and my natural balance around my natural brain chemicals, and were producing chemically induced anxiety, which was completely strange, and my parts were completely shocked with this, and many of the parts that had not been healed, many of the parts that were still carrying burdens that were dormant, okay, because I had accessing zero space so much, but there were parts that still needed the actual deep healing. So for me, that was a huge moment to realize this. So anything that has to do with health, with the body, somatic experiences, etc. There's a very good indication that will bring some clarity and some understanding, and some alleviation of some form. Of course, we don't make any claims at all that this is going to have any effect on any form of medical situation, blah 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 blah. But just imagine, when we're sick, when we're going through a very difficult situation, how do we want our parts hanging out? How do we want the inner environment to be? What do we want to have going on inside? Do we want fear, polarization, anxiety, projections, or do we want understanding? And that's the answer. If we want understanding, that's what parts do. If we allow themselves to heal, if we support themselves to heal, what they bring is understanding, clarity, harmony, and they bring what they do best, which is their original positive intent. Parts are born with an original positive intent that they lose, that they have to let go because they're burdened, because they have to carry a new pain. And then when we heal them and liberate the parts, then they can come back to their original positive intent, and that's what they offer. So imagine, instead of having an inner army of complainers, anxious, producing skippers and parts in tension, in opposition, in polarization, imagine having an army that's not now an army. It's a group of harmonized, whatever you want to call them, that provide resources of understanding, resources of clarity, resources of alleviation, of expansion, right?
Yes.
So for me, it's a no-brainer, and probably that will have an effect on your medical condition. I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor. My doctorate is in entrepreneurship and leadership, but there is a lot written and considered and studied around how our inner disposition when we're in difficult situations either supports or hinders the situation, right? Especially those cycles around heart health and anxiety, and when they get bad, they feed on each other, right? The anxiety feeds the heart condition, and the heart condition feeds the anxiety, and there's a lot going on around many of these. So that's kind of it.
So what a great to close this interview as a foreseen that for myself it is the methodology for the next 2,000 years. So people that they from war to peace, and how we bring the army inside of us to a healing team that works together. So that's and that everybody, I think everybody, and this is needs this, and this is the opportunity for the next 2,000 years, and we are just on the beginning in the conscious level of conscious mind.
Yeah, these models and their evolution are what I consider to be the most important endeavor for humanity right now, and that's why I'm offering many courses for free on IFS, just and how to integrate it with IBC, because it is the source of inner harmony, and that's what we need, right? So thank you, Markus,
thank you so much, Pedro.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.